They didn't even say my name, just the position has been dissolved. That's how it ends, apparently. Not with a confrontation, not even a goodbye. After 23 years, they chose silence, chose cold, chose to forget the very spine that held the building upright when it sagged with its own weight. My name is Jonathan Keller, or was. To them, I suppose I've become a line item on an Excel sheet now, something to streamline. Cost, not a contributor. I joined Kincaid Systems in the fall of 2002, fresh from a chaotic mid-sized consultancy where ideas died in bureaucratic meetings. Back then, Kincaid was scrappy, agile before the word became a buzzword. We had no HR department, just promises. No hierarchy, just trust. I believed in that. I wasn't flashy, never chased titles or politicked for credit. My job was infrastructure, both literal and cultural. I rewrote the back end of our internal systems when no one else could make the APIs talk. I mentored every single systems analyst we hired in that first decade. I stayed late during every crisis, including the 2011 breach that nearly sunk us. I stayed calm then, as always. I was known for that. Still waters, they called me. Funny how quickly still waters become invisible. The office looked different now. Glass walls instead of drywall. Branding consultants replaced engineers. I noticed the shift like a growing ache, subtle at first, but inexorable. There were more words like agility, culture fit, and synergy in meetings and fewer hard questions. Junior managers quoted TED Talks while ignoring the infrastructure crumbling underneath the new UI dashboards they flaunted to investors. I said nothing, not out of fear, out of knowing. You see, when you've watched something grow, it transform, like a child turning into something alien and unrecognizable. There's a certain mourning that happens silently. You bury parts of it in yourself before the funeral even begins. And maybe I was tired. Maybe I'd been tired for years, but I wasn't ready for the way they did it. I'd just returned from a week off. My first real break in 2 years. Lisa, my wife, had begged me to finally take it to rest. We went to the coast. It rained the whole time. I didn't mind. Rain gives permission to be still. Monday morning, I swiped my badge. Red light. Access. Denied. I thought it was a system error. Irony, perhaps. I built that system. At reception, Carla's eyes widened when she saw me. She didn't say anything. Just gave me a tight, sad smile and motioned toward the small side conference room. It's the one with no windows inside. Mark Benton, the new VP of Operations, 3 years at the company. It's a woman I didn't know from HR, and a printed packet. No. Jonathan, good to see you. We appreciate your time here. Just your position has been dissolved. Today is your last day. They use passive voice. That's how cowards speak. I didn't respond. I didn't blink. I simply looked at them, then the packet, then back to them again. Is there anything you need from us? The HR woman asked. Voice thin and practiced. I wanted to laugh. Not bitterly, not cruelly. Just the absurdity of it. Anything I need? I'd built their supply chain backbone, rewrote procurement logic to save them 7 figures annually. I'd stopped a warehouse rollout disaster mid-flight by redirecting servers, manually from my basement at 2 a.m. once. What I needed was dignity. They couldn't give it because they'd sold theirs long ago. I took the packet. Right. I nodded once. Not to them, to myself, and I left. Outside, the sun hit my face like it hadn't in months. There was a breeze, sharp, autumnal. It smelled faintly of rust and maple. It's the kind of wind that reminds you something's ending. I walked past the glass building, past the manicured hedges I used to trim myself in the early days when we couldn't afford groundskeepers, past the parking lot where I'd waited for partners in the rain after late shifts. I walked until my legs ached, until I no longer saw the building when I closed my eyes, and still, I didn't speak of it. Not to Lisa, not to friends. Because I knew something they didn't. I'd seen the foundation crack. I'd seen the shortcuts, the decay under the new paint. I hadn't raised alarm bells yet, but I had a copy of everything. Logs, commits, chains of approvals, and a name. Name they'd forgotten. In forgetting me, I'd have been their biggest mistake. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Lisa asked how the return to work went. I I told her it didn't. That was all. She didn't press. She looked at me for a long time, then put her hand over mine and said, "Take your time." I spent the next 3 days in what used to be our guest room, now a cluttered hybrid of home office, storage space, and forgotten hobbies. I sat at the old desk. It still bore the faint rings of countless coffee cups. I stared at my laptop. Didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I sat in stillness. Let the feeling breathe. Let it expand. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly, I felt ... displaced. Like someone had taken a piece of my identity and filed it away, labeled obsolete. But I'm not one for spirals. I've always been methodical, a trait they once praised when it served them. So on the 4th morning, I opened the laptop and began. It started with a simple question. What, exactly, had I missed while they were preparing to cut me loose? The access to Kincaid's systems was revoked, of course. But my own documentation, local files, network logs, commit histories, those were mine. I'd kept them not out of suspicion, but habit. I never trusted cloud syncs for sensitive work. Always kept local backups. Meticulous versioning. That's who I was. And in those files I began to see it. The shift hadn't just been cultural, it had been infrastructural. It migrated our procurement logic, the code I'd written, tested, and stress-hardened for nearly 2 decades, over to a third-party platform that promised efficiency through automation. I remembered the meetings now, the glossy decks, the smug consultants, the way Benton kept pushing the migration ahead of schedule. Despite my quiet concerns, I'd told them plainly, the dependencies aren't fully mapped. You're going to create invisible failures. They nodded politely. And then they ignored me. Now I saw what they couldn't, in the logs I'd copied before the switch. I noticed anomalies, strange discrepancies between purchase order initiations and final approvals, invoices being split and recombined, timelines that didn't line up, vendors added without vetting, overlapping entries with the same temis. At first I thought it was sloppiness, but then I saw the names attached to the approvals. Same. For junior managers, it's always the same pattern, and Benton's name always at the tail end. A rubber stamp. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. My fingertips were cold. It wasn't fraud, not yet. But it was negligence. At best, at worst. Willful blindness. I didn't call anyone. Didn't email. Didn't even write it down instead. I opened a clean terminal and began piecing it all together. Quietly. There's a difference between making noise and making a record. While the company celebrated its new lean future, I reconstructed the past. Weeks. And in those 2 weeks, not a single person from Kincaid reached out. Not Benton. Not HR. Not even the colleagues I'd trained, mentored. Protected during product launches when their code went sideways. It was as though I'd been airbrushed out of the history, but I remembered everything, every failed pilot program I'd covered for, every number I'd corrected in board meeting prep, every product roadmap that looked good because I kept the back end from falling apart. They were standing on a floor I'd built. The beams were cracking. Then one morning, something strange. HAPA received a LinkedIn message from a recruiter. It's a large firm. No nonsense. Jonathan, I've been following your work at Kincaid for a while. We heard about the reorg. Would love to speak if you're open. I didn't reply right away. Then another came in, and 2 more. Turns out silence speaks, and the silence left by my departure, people were noticing what wasn't working anymore. The reports weren't running correctly. Delivery times were misaligned. Procurement was clogged with redundancies. The nice dashboards couldn't fix the broken pipes beneath. Then I received a text from Marcus Latimer, former CTO at Kincaid, retired 3 years ago. He'd been my fiercest critic once, also my greatest advocate. Just heard about your exit. Didn't see that coming. Neither did they, I suspect. Dared at that. Message for a long time, and I realized I wasn't mourning anymore. I was watching, quietly, and the cracks were growing. I didn't have to lift a finger. That was the most surreal part. I watched from a distance as the structure began to falter, not suddenly, not dramatically, but in slow, undeniable slippage, like a building shifting imperceptibly until the floorboards start to creak. It started with a delay in supply chain execution. An unnoticed bottleneck in the automated logic for parts procurement caused a 5-day delay in the northern distribution hub. That delay triggered penalties from 2 key clients. I knew because I had still fresh contacts in operations. Quiet people. People who used to come to me when the noise got too loud upstairs. They're scrambling, one message read. Benton's blaming the vendor, but it's their own mapping error. Another message came from an old colleague in compliance, who still referred to me as chief, though I'd never held that title formally. Something's rotten. Nobody's saying it. But the data's dirty, and no one knows where the leak is. I didn't respond to any of them. Just read, absorbed, stored. It's like a file marked important hold. Kincaid's reputation had always been built on one quiet promise: dependability. We weren't flashy, but we delivered. Every client interaction, every internal system, every report was a reflection of that. Now, clients were beginning to feel what I'd always shielded them from: fragility. Benton, I was told, launched a task force. A reorg of the reorg. Classic panic move. He called it systems realignment. What it really meant was we broke something we don't understand, and we're afraid to admit it. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in years lit up the screen. Diane Roberts. Former coup, retired early after a bitter clash with the board and with Benton. I answered. Jonathan, she said, not even bothering with hello. Her voice still carried that clipped, precise tone, like every word had been proofed for. Clarity. I heard about the fallout. They're spinning now. I said nothing. She continued. I'm consulting for 2 mid-sized logistics firms. They're both courting former Kincaid clients. There's a vacuum. I'd rather build something. Smarter? Are you in a place to talk? I could have answered then. Could have said yes or not yet. But instead I asked, how bad is it inside? There was a pause. Just a breath. Then they replaced institutional wisdom with branded ignorance. That stayed with me. Branded ignorance. I thanked her and said, I'd consider it. She didn't push. People like Diane never do. They ask once. Then they move. That night, I finally told Lisa everything. She listened without interrupting, hands folded in her lap the way she always did when something real was being said. So what are you going to do? She asked quietly. I don't know yet. She tilted her head. It's not true. She was right. I did know. I knew I wasn't going back. Not to that building, not to that culture. Not even if they offered me a promotion and a public apology, which by now I suspected might actually come. Because failure, especially systemic failure, has a way of boomeranging. And when the stories began to circulate, when investors started asking questions, when client trust eroded to the point of no return, they'd look for a way out, a way to erase the mistakes. They'd reach for a name, and they'd remember mine. 2 days later it happened. A voicemail from Benton himself. Same man who couldn't make eye contact as he handed me my dismissal packet. His voice, once so sure, now had the quality of someone balancing on a wire. Hey, Jonathan. You've been well. We're reassessing some aspects of the realignment, and I'd appreciate the chance to chat. Maybe just pick your brain about some of the old architecture. Nothing formal, just it's an open door. Let me know if you're available. An open door, he thought. I might walk back in through it. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then saved the voicemail. Not out of spite, out of principle. It was evidence of who they really were when the stage lights went out. Later that week, another message came, this time from a board member. This one wasn't casual. It was desperate in a refined, well-punctuated way. Jonathan, your insight is sorely missed. We're in the midst of reviewing leadership decisions made over the past quarter and would welcome your perspective, officially or otherwise. I didn't reply, because it was never about revenge. I wasn't angry. I was finished. But I wasn't done. I had something to build. The messages kept coming, some veiled as casual coffee invites, so others draped in corporate politeness. With phrases like re-engagement, discussions, and legacy alignment opportunities, I ignored them all. There's a strange power in silence, not the absence of speech, but the deliberate withholding of it. A signal, a stance. I didn't owe them noise, and I certainly didn't owe them clarity, but what I did owe to myself, not them, was motion. Not reaction. Intention. So I opened a blank notebook and wrote 3 words. Across the first page. Build, don't fix. That became the rule. The line I wouldn't cross. Wasn't going back to patch someone else's sinking ship. I was going to chart something clean. Something quietly unstoppable. Diane called again. This time I picked up without hesitation. I'm in, I said. She didn't say good. She said, what do you need? That's how you know who understands value. Not what can you do for us, but what do you need to do it right? We met the following week in a private conference space she'd borrowed. No branding, no egos, just a long wooden table and 3 other people I respected deeply. It's all former operators, real ones, not slide deck dreamers. Engineers, architects, logistics strategists. People who'd been bruised by the same system but hadn't lost their edge. I brought my documentation. They brought silence and focus. For 2 hours, I walked them through what Kincaid had become. Not to gloat, not to shame, but to show how systemic decay looks from the inside and how to avoid it from day one. At the end, Diane looked at me and said, so, where does your compass point? I paused. It wasn't a rhetorical question. She really wanted to know. Something lean, I said. Not in size, in purpose. Nothing bloated with consultants, no vanity metrics. Just a system that works because it's honest, transparent, accountable. She smiled. You'll lead it? No, I said. I'll design it. She nodded. Even better. And that. Was it no fanfare? No signing bonus? Just an agreement, sealed in clarity and mutual trust. That night, back home, I sat in the kitchen with Lisa as she stirred tea, her sleeves pushed up, hair loose from the day. There was a quiet joy in the air, the kind that doesn't need explaining. You're glowing, she said. I shook my head, half laughing. No, just finally aligned. She nodded. So what are you building? I thought for a second. Something that remembers its people. I meant it. I wasn't going to recreate Kincaid. That would be like copying an old house that had already burned down. No. What I wanted was something living. Something that grew because it listened. That thrived not on speed or slogans, but on integrity. And as we began assembling the first team, not hires, partners, I saw something happen. Word spread. Within 3 weeks, 2 major clients I'd supported quietly reached out. Not because we marketed anything. We hadn't even named the company yet. It came because they remembered how things used to work when I was still involved, because their systems were still glitching, because they trusted me. And then came the call I'd have expected. Not like this. It was from Kincaid's interim CEO. Apparently Benton had stepped back. I could hear the tension in his throat. The PR gloss had thinned. Jonathan, we'd like to formally extend an offer, not just as a contractor. We're restructuring leadership. I believe there's a place for you at the table. I closed my eyes, listening to the voice of a man who had no idea how late he was. He meant well, maybe, but meaning has a half-life, and his had long since decayed. I appreciate the call, I said calmly, but I'm not coming back. There was a pause, then awkwardly. Can I ask why? I could have said 1,000 things. Could have told him about the room with no windows, about the badge denial, about the silence they offered after 23 years. But I did, instead. I said because I'm building something better, and I'm already late. I hung up, and just like that, the cord snapped, not in anger. In finality, they had discarded me in silence. And now, silence had become my answer. I never wanted revenge. What I wanted was proof. It's not in words, in structure, in function. In the quiet satisfaction of a system that didn't collapse when no one was looking, so we built one. We called it Calderon, after an old mentor of mine who once said, "If your system needs heroics to function, it's not a system. It's a liability with lipstick." That phrase lived in my bones now. We didn't make a splashy launch. No billboards. No startup press features. It's just a simple prototype, a lean interface, and a few deeply specific clients who needed exactly what we knew how to deliver: infrastructure. That worked because the people behind it did. I oversaw architecture. It's not because I needed control, because I needed coherence. I designed every logic path the way I used to when I was younger. Pencil first. Simple questions. Brutal clarity. Where does this go? Who is responsible? What happens when it fails? Not if, but when. I never used the word disruption. It's a hollow promise, a justification for chaos. Instead, we spoke about resilience. We called our first product line Anchor. Not for what it held down, but for what it allowed others to build on top of it. 3 months in, we were profitable. Not unicorn scaled, not VC hyped. Just profitable. Clients knew they could rely on us. That we responded like humans, not bots. That when something went wrong, we didn't hide behind jargon or redirect blame. We fixed it fast. And then, one of Kincaid's oldest clients called, not to say hello. So I apologize. Her name was Meredith King. She'd been VP of Operations at Thorndale Freight when I first integrated their systems into Kincaid's pipeline a decade ago. Sharp woman, no tolerance for smoke and mirrors, she told me. What I already suspected, they're spiraling. Nobody knows who owns what. I asked for a data pull, and it took them 10 days. It used to take 2 hours. Then she paused. Her voice changed. I don't know what happened, Jonathan, but I should have called you sooner. I didn't need the apology. I accepted it. 2 weeks later, she signed a 2-year contract with Calderon. And just like that, the shift became visible. It's not on social media, not in headlines, in back channels. The quiet space where trust gets built, brick by brick. Diane handled most of the client-side strategy. I stayed behind the curtain, where I belonged. Not hiding, anchoring. I trained every new systems hire myself. Personally reviewed each change request. Not forever, just long enough to ingrain the culture in the bones of the place. We didn't preach integrity. We documented it. Every choice we made was traceable, every failure visible, every fix teachable. And it worked. One afternoon, about 5 months in, I got a package, a return address. Inside was a framed photo. A group shot from Kincaid's 20-year anniversary party. I was there, barely visible in the back row, smiling like a man still trying to believe in things. Behind me, Benton, arms raised, beaming like a man who thought legacy could be measured in LinkedIn endorsements. There was a sticky note attached. Just 3 words, handwritten.
What?
They miss you. I looked at it for a long time, then I set it on a shelf, turned backwards, because they didn't miss me. They missed what I carried. Now that thing lived somewhere else. It had a name, it had a future, and it no longer needed their memory to survive. I never wanted revenge. What I wanted was proof. It's not in words, in structure, in function. In the quiet satisfaction of a system that didn't collapse when no one was looking, so we built one. We called it Calderon, after an old mentor of mine who once said, "If your system needs heroics to function, it's not a system. It's a liability with lipstick." That phrase lived in my bones now. We didn't make a splashy launch. No billboards. No startup press features. It's just a simple prototype, a lean interface, and a few deeply specific clients who needed exactly what we knew how to deliver: infrastructure. That worked because the people behind it did. I oversaw architecture. It's not because I needed control, because I needed coherence. I designed every logic path the way I used to when I was younger. Pencil first. Simple questions. Brutal clarity. Where does this go? Who is responsible? What happens when it fails? Not if, but when. I never used the word disruption. It's a hollow promise, a justification for chaos. Instead, We spoke about resilience. We called our first product line Anchor, not for what it held down, but for what it allowed others to build on top of it. 3 months in, we were profitable. Not unicorn scaled, not VC hyped. Just profitable. Clients knew they could rely on us. That we responded like humans, not bots. That when something went wrong, we didn't hide behind jargon or redirect blame. We fixed it fast. And then, one of Kincaid's oldest clients called, not to say hello. So I apologize. Her name was Meredith King. She'd been VP of Operations at Thorndale Freight when I first integrated their systems into Kincaid's pipeline a decade ago. Sharp woman, no tolerance for smoke and mirrors, she told me. What I already suspected, they're spiraling. Nobody knows who owns what. I asked for a data pull, and it took them 10 days. It used to take 2 hours. Then she paused. Her voice changed. I don't know what happened, Jonathan, but I should have called you sooner. I didn't need the apology. I accepted it. 2 weeks later, she signed a 2-year contract with Calderon. And just like that, the shift became visible. It's not on social media, not in headlines, in back channels. The quiet space where trust gets built, brick by brick. Diane handled most of the client-side strategy. I stayed behind the curtain, where I belonged. Not hiding, anchoring. I trained every new systems hire myself. Personally reviewed each change request. Not forever, just long enough to ingrain the culture in the bones of the place. We didn't preach integrity. We documented it. Every choice we made was traceable, every failure visible, every fix teachable. And it worked. One afternoon, about 5 months in, I got a package, a return address. Inside was a framed photo. A group shot from Kincaid's 20-year anniversary party. I was there, barely visible in the back row, smiling like a man still trying to believe in things. Behind me, Benton, arms raised, beaming like a man who thought legacy could be measured in LinkedIn endorsements. There was a sticky note attached. Just 3 words, handwritten.
What?
They miss you. I looked at it for a long time, then I set it on a shelf, turned backwards, because they didn't miss me. They missed what I carried. Now that thing lived somewhere else. It had a name, it had a future, and it no longer needed their memory to survive.